Hey, what's up, guys? This is Grayson, the Dean 221 Nichols, and I'm here on the Elite Rounders channel, and we are going to be doing a high stakes hand review today with one of my first and favorite students, Mike Ender. So I believe this hand took place from the 2K buy-in tournament on Pokerstars last week. But Mike, why don't you give us the lowdown? Let us see the hand you got into here.
Okay. So we're playing actually a 2K. I qualified to this 2K. It's a it's a progressive KO tournament. It's not a turbo, but it's still the structure is going pretty fast. We have about 40 bigs, 45 bigs, and we have Ace Jack in this situation. We are, as you can see, we are in cutoff, and under the gun opens and comes to me, and I decide to raise here. This is not a hand. Well, in general, I'm raising here for value. It's not a hand I would like to call with because I don't really want to see a flop with this hand, and it's a hand that I can safely fold to a 4-bet.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
I like all
so
that,
this
what you just said right there. I think, right off the bat, this does strike me as a spot that's very in between. And I think a good rule of thumb can be when you have something that is at the bottom of your flatting range, simply just moving that over to your 3-bet bluff range can be a pretty effective tool for us, right? And I think we can agree that ace jack offsuit is probably the worst hand that you would consider flatting with here. Am I right?
exactly, yeah.
And then what would be like the worst suited Broadway hands that you might flat in this spot?
Maybe King Jack suited. I would, I would
Yeah, king jack
before.
suited, queen jack suited. Absolutely. And I think those hands would probably benefit from this as well, to be honest. Like I see a universe where you have a 3-bet bluff range that looks a lot like ace 10 off, ace jack off, king queen off, king jack suited, queen jack suited. And then you have your
Mhm,
value hands of like aces, kings, queens,
exactly,
jacks,
exactly.
ace king. Like we could be very fairly balanced if you wanted to be in this spot. Not that we always need to be, but you can be in this spot. Um, I mentioned the suited factor. I believe if you had ace jack suited here, I'd be a little bit more inclined just to take a flop because I think we realize so much of our equity by seeing the flop. I think it becomes pretty clear when you have ace jack suited. If you see the flop, you're looking for an ace high board, a jack high board, or two of your suit. And we're going to hit those around 4 out of 10 times on the flop. So we're pretty comfortable playing that post flop. However, something you mentioned, right off the bat when you said you weren't wild about flatting this hand is something important to point out that if we do hit an ace here, if we do just call the 5K and we hit an
Mhm.
ace here, that opens us up to a lot of difficult spots. Like there's a very good chance that our opponent has ace king or ace queen, and we end up losing a lot of chips to them. Or if they don't have the ace at all, how do we really get paid, right? So it presents kind of a difficult spot. And I think that adding the fold equity to us that we gain from a 3-bet bluff will make up for that loss essentially. And so I love your line here. I think the 3-bet bluff is perfect in this spot. Like I mentioned, I'd probably go about jacks plus, ace king plus, maybe tens plus for value in this spot. And then this seems like a perfect hand to be in your 3-bet bluff range. And then I would typically flat here, maybe more like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, king queen suited, and then maybe like pairs like sixes, sevens, eights, nines, tens, something like that. But I love this 3-bet bluff.
But I agree with you, Gray. Like the suited situation gives you also way more playability a bit after that on the flop,
Yep.
and I think that's really important. Like this is an important factor. Now, ace queen off, I might flat as well. I don't know if my reasoning is good for that, but I really want to see actually a hand. I wouldn't want to get out. And like if I get 4-betted with ace queen off, it's going to be very difficult for me to call. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a good reasoning, but I would flat off an ace queen off there as well.
Yeah, I think you could do a mixed approach with ace queen off here. I think it could fluctuate somewhere between probably a 3-bet bluff, oddly, and then a flat for value, like you said. I think the hand's not good enough to 3-bet and get it in. I think sometimes if our opponent's crazy and might 4-bet bluff, then we could 5-bet shove with it. But that's a whole different can of worms. I think in general with ace queen, it's going to be more of a flat or a 3-bet bluff in a spot like this. And
Uh,
honestly, I don't hate 3-betting and folding with ace queen in this situation because I believe he 4-bets you so seldom that it's not going to happen a lot. So it's not like we're going to get in that bad spot so often. You know, like we will hate ourselves, sure, when he 4-bets, but how often is he really going to 4-bet in this spot, right?
Sure.
Whereas if you flat ace queen in this spot, something that will happen a lot is button flatting, big blind flatting, or small blind shoving, and then under the gun flatting or re-raising, you know, and all of those scenarios are very weird for us. So while I'm with you, it's good typically to have an intention with ace queen right off the bat. I think it is one of the hands that we can sometimes lean towards 3-bet bluffing per se in some spots pre-flop because it'll help us avoid these really rough post-flop spots with them. But I'm with you. I think we can go back and forth with that hand. I think the suited is a slam dunk call because that, I mean, we call to see an ace or a queen or two of our suit. And again, knowing you flop a flush draw 10% of the time can be a very helpful tiebreaker for us when considering whether or not to call a hand.
Okay,
So yeah,
so what happens? It gets folded, and opener just calls.
And one last thing I wanted to mention too that I should have said, one of the even added benefits of your 3-bet, I like it so much more, is because I think I see that guy Lucky Lalem in the small blind. If he were to shove pre-flop, say you flatted the 5K and he jammed, well, I believe the original raiser will never fold. It's so small, he will always make it like 28K or he'll flat, and you'll be in an awful spot either way, right? So knowing that that will happen somewhere around 15% of the time makes me even less inclined to flat call there. So just another bonus for a good reason for why your 3-bet was optimal here.
Yeah, and it's a KO tournament, so like KOs are $500, you know, in a 2K. So
yep, even
yeah,
more reason that he would never fold to us and
sure.
put us in a bad spot. Yeah, well said.
Sure. So here comes the flop, and he checks, and I decide to bet.
Yeah, so really fast, before you bet, I think this is important. I think a lot of people have some bad habits when it comes to betting. First of all, I think people have bad habits of sizing. I think they formulate their sizing based on habit, and they don't really think about why they're betting that amount. You know, intention is obviously the key. But on top of that, I think you need to recognize there are multiple lines you can take here, right? So the first thing I think we need to decide is this. So you have 2x pot left, and you flop top pair, right? So this is a spot where I think we have to make the decision. We have to either say, A, we're never folding, so let's get maximum value from the hands that we're ahead of, or B, we want to find an escape route. We want to find a way of getting away from this hand because he does have some strong hands in his range. He could very possibly, I mean, his range reeks of ace queen, and it's not even crazy for him to possibly have a tight ace king flat call, right? He could also have jack 10 suited, king queen. Yeah, exactly. So it's a range that is scary, right? So again, to me, it's figuring out if we're going to go broke or if we want to leave ourselves out. So which one do you want to do in this spot? That would decide what we do on the flop, I think.
So basically, like you hit it right off the bat as well. I think his range is going to be pretty defined with his reaction to our bet, right? Because like, what's his range pre-flop to call us here, right? What is his range to pre-flop? Like Gray said, ace queen, king queen, tons of pairs, right?
Yep. His stuff like 7s, 8s, 9s, those are done. They're not doing anything, right? They just check fold.
Exactly. So my sizing here is that I don't need to go too big. I don't think I need to go too big because it's going to have the same effect. He's going to fold most of his hands that way he's worse than us. So we're talking about the pairs, even pair of tens might peel one, but they're not going to continue there for long. And jacks either scared. So these are the two only ones that might call. All the rest will fold or usually 3-bet us. Because if someone has king queen there, he's going to 3-bet us. If someone has ace queen, he's going to 3-bet us. So I think in this situation, there's no need to bet too big.
Yeah.
Because we have an answer for sure. And I think our escape route is pretty clear. We know what he has when he's going to call, like mostly, you know, we're going to know what he has. So I'm thinking here, if we get if he raises us there, I think it's an obvious fold.
I think you're onto something. I think, you know, in general, I would say that when we want to bet fold, you know, i.e. that escape route, that off ramp that we're talking about, typically I like to go higher sizing in those spots because I find it's easier to fold your hand after you've bet bigger and then they've raised, because at that point I think they bluff you so infrequently, and it almost always is the goods there, so I'm comfortable folding at that point, right? But I'm kind of with you here. I don't think it really matters. Like, I don't think he has a lot of room to spaz out. Like, I don't think he's going to just spaz shove with sevens, eights, nines, tens, jacks. Like, I don't see that happening. I think that he's just going to fold those hands, maybe peel the tens and jacks if you bet small. And then he's probably going to jam with something like, ace queen, king queen, and then like maybe, I mean, I don't even think he has like ace 10 or worse pre-flop. I think you made a pretty good size 3-bet pre, like 3.5x or bigger. He's raising from UTG. I don't think he's gonna have like ace 9 suited, ace 10 type hands. So the way I see it is, I'm with you. He has stuff that's just folding, or he's got those two pair hands, the ace queen, king queen. So yeah, I think bet folding makes a lot of sense here. And if you chose the other route, which the one I mentioned of never folding, I think I would lean more towards checking here. And the idea would be check and then hope he just blasts off with his sevens, eights, nines, tens, or whatever on the turn, essentially, That is how I believe you would maximize value from the hands that he has that we're beating, and we lose to what we lose to anyway, right? Plus, one of the main hands we're worried about here is king queen, and we actually have some equity against that. Obviously, ace jack 10 all can catch up. So don't hate checking back for that reason too. But I'm with you. I think both routes are totally reasonable here. I think it's just important to have a plan, and have intention before you bet what your plan is, as opposed to just betting and then seeing what happens,
So yeah, and we didn't talk pre-flop. It's true, like the sizing, I made it slightly bigger. Normally, I raise 3x there. I raise 3.5 to also kind of determine. I'm raising the under the gun. The pot is going to be bigger on the flop, so it's going to be pretty determined. Like, it's going to make a life easier. And I think that's important in poker. You want to make your life the easiest possible pre-flop so that you get to the flop and it's easier to play.
Yeah,
and I think that.
I agree.
So,
and I think you narrow down his range, you get some of the jack 10 suited, queen 10 suited, queen jack suited hands. I assume a lot of those should probably just fold, which should make our lives a little bit easier post flop figuring out what's going on.
I would say yes, because he opens under the gun. He knows that I know that he's opening under the gun, and I'm three betting. So my range is pretty strong.
Yeah. Love it.
Okay, so I bet.
Okay.
Yeah, so here I bet a bit small, like I said, and he goes all in.
Yeah, and so okay, so back to the sizing. Like, let's pretend you also had 150,000 in chips. Then I might say that your sizing is too small, because now when you go that small, there's a chance that he might bluff us to like 45K, right? But he doesn't have that ability here because you only have 70 back. So I think your sizing works here based on stack size to pot ratio. But if you had more chips, I would definitely prefer going bigger for the bet fold here.
I agree. And in this situation, for me, it's an obvious fold, and I fold, and I put him on this sort of hands. Obviously, sometimes he might have a hand that he decided to call us pre-flop that was too weak, like maybe like suited cards or something. But it's also we actually losing against Jack 10, anyways.
Yeah, I think 9-10 of hearts maybe once in a blue moon, but I truly rule those out for the most part with your pre-flop sizing, I think.
Then he has aces too sometimes, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and well said by you. Absolutely. I'd probably say not as often. I think queens is in the realm of possibility too. I was mentioning that ace king could have been tight here and careful. I wouldn't be shocked if ace king off or queen queen played their hand this tight. I've seen people do it for sure.
Exactly, but I would say most often than not, we are talking about king queen here or ace queen. I think these are hands that are so obvious that he played it like that. Now maybe it can be wrong, but it's going to be mostly that. And so I decided to fold.
Yeah, and in general, when you 3-bet in a spot where you look pretty strong and you get flatted from a guy who looks pretty strong pre, I think a safe range to give them right off the bat is like ace queen, ace jack suited, sevens, eights, nines, tens, jacks. Like, that to me is the heart of that range usually. And that's one of the reasons why I often tell people never to cold flat 3-bets, because I feel like that's what you look like you have when you cold flat a 3-bet. And I don't like to play any hand face up to the point where my opponent knows what I have, even if it's a strong one,
I'm thinking he could have like ace. Now that I'm thinking, like, imagine he had ace jack, how would he play it,
I think he would just fold ace jack offsuit pre-flop. Maybe ace jack suited he would definitely still call, and I'd like to think that like ace 5 suited, all of his ace x suiteds would just fold in a heartbeat against your position, your sizing, and your stack size.
Yeah.
So you fold here, right?
So this was this hand.
It makes sense. It's reasonable, and it's tough when there's only like two hands that we feel like they have. I usually don't end up folding a ton when it's only like a couple hands, like one or two hands I put my opponent on, but it's really hard to put him on anything else here. And it's hard to put him on any bluffs unless somehow he got to the flop, like we said, with like 9, 10 of hearts. And I just don't think he got there that often with a hand that wide and that weak. So I like your read, and I think this is a unusual spot, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think this is a great example of a hand that, you know, you had two difficult junctures, right? But I believe you took a good, thoughtful approach to them and came up with, somewhat outside of the box play pre-flop, which I believe a lot of people might end up flatting there. I would say slightly more people flat there than three bet bluff, and I think they're making a mistake. And then I also think that you might have made a slightly outside of the box fold here. I think a lot of people might just go broke in this spot, but I also get the vibe you were beat. So really cool hand. Thanks for sharing this with us, Mike. We'll be trying to do more of these high stakes hand reviews every other week or so. So definitely tune in to the Elite Rounders channel to check out our next one coming out soon. Good luck, everyone.
Yep.
Take it easy.
Bye bye.